Welcome back to the Cowboy Up podcast, where the talk is all about the Western way of life. You know, the term Renaissance man or woman is a compliment. It really is. It's usually given to a man or woman who has lots of interests, lots of abilities, and they can operate in the elite status of one of those very talented and gifted people. However, that term applies just as much to the cowboy, to the farmer, to the rancher, because they have to have a lot of interest and a lot of ways of making a contribution and of making life work. So we've got another kind of Renaissance man. Arnold Burrell is back for round two. We had so much fun. Russell and Alan invited him back again. So let's mosey over to the corral and see what Arnold and Russell and Alan are going to talk about today. This is the Cowboy Up podcast, and it begins right now.
So, Alan, good to see you.
Always good to be here.
Good. It's great to have you. And we've talked Arnold Burrell into coming back, and so this is just to remind anybody who didn't. Arnold started out with his family ranching at an ajito in Mexico. That's communal ranching, if you missed that last one. And he moved to Arizona, where he founded Burrell and Burrell Farms Partnership, and those farms are in Marana, which is, of course, just north of Tucson, Eloy, Arizona, which is a bit more north of Tucson. And Arnold also is a serious rodeo guy and does what we still, I think we were calling it calf roping. It's now on the program tie-down roping, which is when you run down the calf, throw him, tie him, and team roping. And those are two of the three events in rodeo I always talk about as being directly from real ranch work almost. Calf roping would be two people, not one really, but doing all the same work. And he was president of the Grand Canyon Rodeo Association. That's Arizona's pro rodeo group. And he's still competing. He was out 4th of July. So welcome, Arnold. Good to have you back again.
Thanks for having me back.
Where were you over the 4th?
Let's see here. Linden Valley, Taylor, Arizona, and Springerville.
Typical rodeo man, wear out the car going from event to event.
Absolutely. Let me throw something in there when you were talking about my history, and a large part of it that was left out. When we came across, my dad got a job and evolved into, he ran a large hog farm south of Tucson. It was a subsidiary of Arizona Feeds. We had it was an 850 to 900 sow operation. We had 9,000 hogs under roof. They ate every day, they had babies every day, and they died every day. And that's where I cut my teeth, really. That was the lion's share of the work. Also made me a tough kid. If anybody grew up in the 60s on a hog farm with the name Arnold during the height of Green Acres, you would know how tough you could be. So that having been said, I wanted that part of the history. We ran that farm. Dad ran it for the better part of 20 years. Wow. And we put 2 million pounds of red meat on America's dinner table every year.
Well, we've never had anybody on the program that confessed to being a tough guy, and you did just now, and I'm proud of you for that.
And he probably never had anybody that confessed being a hog farmer either. So there you go.
I just read a book that I don't believe the premise at all about, but it was a fascinating book and talked about agriculture and lots of things. It was called The End of the World is Just the Beginning. Isn't there more pork than any other meat worldwide?
I would have to believe so, because it's such a main staple for China.
Yeah, I'm thinking it was the number one meat source. I could be wrong, but it was an interesting book talking. Where did your pork go? Did it leave and get processed in a big processor? Or?
Great story, yes. So years ago, remember Cudahy, which was right there in Phoenix? We shipped 214 hogs twice a week to Cudahy. Then when Cudahy got shut down, our hogs went over to Farmer John in L.A. That plant is still open to this day. Can you imagine? There's a kill plant in the middle of LA. And then a lot of our pork also went to northern Mexico. So.
And did they go to Mexico live, or did they?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. And then they got processed there.
Exactly.
So are you still raising a lot of hogs?
I can't even hardly smell bacon.
It's all alfalfa. You feed them, not raise them.
I'm cured. I'm cured. I've taken the cure.
Is that like getting rid of a disease?
Kind of. Yes. Yes. So one of the benefits that we would get from Arizona Feeds is they would give us 2 hogs a year to butcher. So I've had hog prepared in every way. It's like the Forrest Gump, shrimp creel, shrimp gumbo, shrimp. Yeah, I've had hog the same way in every way imaginable, and I'm over it.
You're over it. You've been cured.
I don't even want to smell a pork chop cooking. I'm telling you.
It's fine. I read an article, and I didn't get all the way through it, but it said that one of California's many goals in terms of food, and they're trying to shape what people eat and what they're allowed to eat. And I read that, I don't even know how accurate it was, but part of the headline was trying to long-term eliminate pork from the California diet.
That's surprising.
I don't even, it's supposed to be pretty efficient, so I don't really get it. Shifting gears completely, Saudi Arabia. We talked about it last time.
About the large Saudi farm in Vicksburg.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm glad that we're going to visit that subject, because there's been a lot of misinformation given by the media, because they have a hot potato that they love to play with, and they're tossing it around because it gets them ratings, I guess.
Well, that's
but that
the media.
farm was for sale when the Saudis bought it. I looked at it myself. We considered buying that.
It's one down near Yuma.
No, this is it's on I-8, not I-10.
Okay.
So it's out by Quartzsite, if you will.
Quartzsite. Yeah.
Well, that farm was for sale. The Saudis bought it and they developed it. They're not doing anything wrong. They're not doing anything illegal down there. In fact, I know the guy that owned it, or know of the guy that owned it and had put it up for sale, because he was broke on it. He was he'd had enough. So there's been a lot. I make this analogy. There's been a lot of guff given to them about the export of our water, the use of our water to make hay, to send back home to Saudi Arabia.
Back to Saudi, yeah.
But it's a good thing that we use every pound of copper that we mine in Arizona right here in this state, isn't it? And I've never heard of Detroit selling a car outside of Michigan. Have you? That is the silliest argument I've ever heard in my whole life. It's like, hey, I took my moron pill. Can I say something on the air? Seriously. And that's exactly what this is. If the state of Arizona doesn't want them pumping that water, put that area in an AMA and regulate it. I have to deal with an AMA. I have to deal with Department of Water Resources and what they allow me to do and don't allow me to do. And believe me, they're consummate at what they do. Don't very much like them, but they're consummate at what they do. Maybe they ought to go down there and put that in an AMA area and regulate what the Saudis are doing. Otherwise, shut your mouth.
So that's La Paz County.
I think so, yes.
Which is kind of just fundamentally a water district. Is that a fair statement? I've heard people say La Paz County was created just to be a water management zone.
I can't answer that. I don't know. I do remember La Paz County being Yuma County.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
it was
created one more county.
Right.
They probably had some people they couldn't get along with, so they said, fine, we'll carve ourselves out.
Well, yes. The Domenas, our lobbyist friends, say that it was all about water. But so why is La Paz, or why is that area not in an AMA, active management area, like where we are sitting right now, which is heavily regulated? You're heavily regulated.
Because there's no population there. So we don't have to save the water for the municipalities, for the population. So we're not going to regulate it. That's why there wasn't an AMA in Wilcox. Nobody talks about the race to the bottom over in Wilcox like they should. That's even more critical than what's going on in Vicksburg. But nobody wants to talk about that.
Race to the bottom, meaning water levels going down.
Water levels, you bet.
You got to spell that out.
You bet. Sorry, my
For
bad.
me.
My bad. No, you're right.
And I have read quite a bit about Wilcox. What's happening there?
That large dairy moved in. They're started to and have accomplished buying a lot of the farm ground. They want to farm that ground. As the wells weaken, they deepen the wells. And then pretty soon the neighbors can't pump because their wells don't reach the water anymore. And that's called the race to the bottom. So you have two options: walk away from it or dig a deeper hole. And a lot of the domestic wells are drying up.
Is there unlimited water the deeper you go, or is that just all finite?
It's finite. Yeah.
No, we'll pump it all out one day.
They'll pump it all out. Yes.
Wilcox will dry up and blow away.
And we'll wait for us to get over this drought period, and we'll start recharging correctly, and maybe it'll come back. Maybe we'll hold our own, but it's an unknown. It's an unknown.
Wow, that's a little scary.
Yeah, it is. I mean, look at what's happening in was it Rancho Rio or?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Up out.
multi-million-dollar homes, and they're hauling water every day like you're in Rocky Point.
Yeah, outside Phoenix.
Yeah, putting a tank on top of your house so you can gravity flow the water into the house. Think about that. I mean, there's these large aquifers in Tucson. Has the Tucson AMA is unbelievable, or the aquifer is unbelievable.
Unbelievable in that
the
it's
strength of
so
it.
strong.
But even in this area, we have people running out of water because they're in a sub-aquifer, didn't realize it, and they pumped it dry. But to give you some idea about the Tucson aquifer, there's a farm out west that I bought, the Jones Farm. When I bought that farm, static water level was at 250 feet. Today it's at 150 feet. And that means a lot to me.
The recharge basins out there is what that's all about?
Well, it's all one basin here. But that means a lot to me because I was able to take 100 foot worth of shaft off of that well. That's very heavy shafting. And so the efficiency, the cost to pump really went down.
Why is that filling up? From where?
I think mostly to do with the recharge basins the city of Tucson has
That's
put
what
in.
I was
A very
asking.
successful program as far as I'm concerned.
So let's explain to people what the recharge basins are.
Well, these large basins where they're taking their CAP allotment and putting it out on the ground, and really it's a little bit of genius. Instead of building all these, if you will, filtering systems and cleaning systems for the CAP water, they let Mother Earth do what Mother Earth does naturally anyway. And so by the time that water gets down into the aquifer,
They pump
it's
these
drinking
basins
water.
full and just let
let
it percolate
on
Yeah.
down. You bet.
But isn't that ironically a result of the fact that when the CAP, which is again to remind people, Central Arizona Project Canal, that's that water from the Colorado, and it came into Tucson, and it was going to, we were the biggest city in America, Tucson was, solely dependent on well water, and so we were going to fix that with the canal, and the water coming out of the canal was chemically significantly different, and all this water smelled and changed color and freaked everybody in Tucson out, and so they passed a law in Tucson, or it was a referendum or whatever, initiative, and they said, oh, we can't have CAP water. So the government, in this case cleverly, then said, fine, we won't give it to you. And then they just dumped it into these settlement ponds, right, out in Avra Valley, and then it
pump it up again.
naturally filtered, better way anyway, and now they're getting good well water.
Well, we could have gotten away with the initial program, the initial plan. It took, if you will, envision just a valve. It took Phoenix Valley, the users up there, it took them about 600 days to turn the valve on. They turned it 1/600th of a degree every day. Okay, so all that chemical and stuff that went through those pipes and dissolved the old rust and whatever, it came out of the faucet, but you couldn't even detect it. Tucson, we turned it all on in one day. We put free flow on in one day, and we had gushers in the middle of streets for 70-year-old pipes that we didn't realize had eroded to such a degree. Because we were smarter than Phoenix, I guess, but I don't know. I don't know.
We were about 600 times dumber. Is what
You
we
just
were.
defined tongue-in-cheek there.
Yes. We had syrup coming out of our faucets, and they never saw theirs.
That's funny. I never heard that because, of course, as you know, you were here. It was a huge controversy. And
Yes.
all kinds of ugly conflict surrounding.
Yeah, a lot of angry people with that. When
There was.
their water tasted bad and they were wanting to fight, and they should. You expect good water because
Well, if they'd slipped that valve on slower,
Yeah.
they would have solved the problem, right?
1 degree a day. Yeah.
So you may or may not know. Years ago, a long time ago, 20 plus years ago, Phoenix per capita used 2 times the water that Tucson used
Per capita. Mm-hmm.
Do you have any idea how that goes now? I mean, Phoenix still
I would
pretty
imagine
water.
it's lower than that.
Yeah.
Years ago, when that per capita came out, probably SRP was still going quite strong. And SRP was a bunch of retired farm ground. So everybody had a yard that used to be a cotton field or whatever. You still had grandfathered water rights. So everybody up there would flood their yard just like an irrigated field. And I would imagine that's what happened in those days. But as the population has grown and less of that population is within the SRP, I'm sure you've seen a drop in that per capita use.
And SRP is Salt River Project, which is a series of canals and pulls water off the Salt River, and there's a series of lakes that are part of that whole drainage. And
so where do you foresee it going? I mean, look out in the future 50 years.
What are you asking? Water?
Water.
Yeah.
You know, how's our state going to provide the water for the people that are going to be here? Are we ever going to have to regulate the number of people that come in based on water availability or anything like that?
Well, I think this drought is breaking a little bit. I kind of made a prediction a few years back that we were going to have a lottery, and if you didn't get the right colored card, you were going to have to leave the state. We weren't going to have enough water for everybody. I'm serious.
Were you going to run that board?
Well, I'll tell you what, I wouldn't want anything to do with it. Yeah. But anyway, I think, the things I've heard lately is a desalinization plant in the Baja, which is, I think we're going to trade water there. We're going to give Mexico the desalinated water, and we're going to take over their allotment from the Colorado. That's supposed to help some.
That's probably in the foreseeable future.
That's the foreseeable
there.
future. Yeah. And then, of course, the big pipelining is still talked about to this day, and whether we can bring water from the north and drop it in the Colorado River Basin somewhere upstream. That's really wild stuff to me to think about. A pipeline of that magnitude.
Yeah, Minnesota wouldn't mind losing some of the Mississippi River water and have it piped down here.
10,400 lakes.
But you just remember the old adage, whiskey's for drinking, water's for fighting over. And I don't care. I don't care if you, even if you've got too much water, you don't want to think of the day that you don't have enough, so you won't be that liberal with your water. I'll guarantee you. So I just think there's just too many agreements that have to come to be for something like that to ever happen. And too much land across.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, on that, we'll take a break.
And thank you. Boy, we learn more here by accident than most places by design. My name is Stan Houston. I'm kind of the leader of the Cowboy Spirit USA. We do the production work for the Cowboy Up podcast. And oftentimes people say, well, this podcast stuff, what's it all about? And I try to respond this way. You know what? It's about you reaching out and connecting with your audience. And everybody needs an audience to be successful in life and business. It's a way to bring your message, your story, bring it to life, and maybe even give you a touch of immortality. Like, this program is going to last a long, long time because we put it on the internet, we put it in the archives, and it's there for many, many years. And the learning and the educating and the sense of humor and the wit and personality just kind of carries on forever. So why don't you think about that for you? That's right. Your business, your organization, your ranch, your farm even. Yes, we have people who just run ranches and do farms, and they do podcasts. We can help you. So why don't you reach out to me at stan@witradio.net. That's stan@witradio.net, and check our web stage out at witradio.net. And then get back in touch with me, and maybe in 2023, before this year is done, we're going to have you join Russell and Alan. You're going to be telling your story and interviewing your friends and guests on the radio. And now we go back to that fun time with the Renaissance Cowboys.
Alan and I were talking, we were talking about in a recent podcast about the Santa Cruz River and did it run and were there ships or boats and this and that. And I'd heard that it was one of these Arizona rivers that go up and down. It's like they call the Hassayampa up by Wickenburg, the upside down river. That's the Indian, because it's basically all under the sand, or, below vision. Tell us something about the Santa Cruz, which is, of course, just a few miles from here, and traverses all of this area.
Well, I'm glad you asked. A couple of things, and the first thing is it's the only river in the world that runs both north and south. So it runs south into Mexico from the headwaters, and like you said in a previous podcast, does a U-turn and then runs north. And it's funny because it also is one of the biggest major rivers that really goes nowhere. So back when it was natural, it would deadhead in what we call the Eloy area now, and it was a big swamp, and it basically recharged the Eloy Basin. Occasionally it would bubble up and over the basin if it was a wet enough year, and it might make the salt or something of that nature, but historically it didn't. It didn't really have an avenue until Colonel Green changed the course of the river around the turn of the 19th century. He changed the course of the Santa Cruz River at Red Rock, basically. Actually, it's called Santa Cruz, the little spot where he turned it, and shot it out west to liberate the Eloy Basin from the river so he could farm it. So he shot it out west, and I know all this stuff because I sit on the Green Reservoir Flood Control District, and they built a bunch of levees to try to control it, and he was trying to create farm ground because it was obviously a strong aquifer underneath.
Let me go back for a minute just to set the stage. The river starts up in the mountains up near Silver City, New Mexico.
No, the river starts in the San Rafael Valley of Arizona, right down here by Patagonia.
Oh, I was talking about the Gila.
Oh, the Gila, yes.
And then makes a great big loop, goes clear down almost.
That's the Santa Cruz makes that loop. It's the Santa Cruz River. It goes south, turns, and then comes north.
Comes north.
Yes.
But with the Santa Cruz, so it dead ended in Eloy. How did he try and get that water off that marsh? What can
you imagine building a trench the size of what he built, which is probably a 15-mile trench with very high levees, with nothing but mules, trip rakes, and a bunch of boys from China.
A lot of mule skinners there.
A lot of mule skinners. One of those little things probably holds about, what would you guess? Tenth of a yard of dirt.
Yeah, maybe.
And you would slide it all the way up to the levee, drop it off, and go back down to the bottom and get another scoop. And he changed the course of a river with that, which is pretty amazing work. Like I said, liberated that area. We didn't know enough about the dynamics of water in those days and hydrology, and he didn't realize he was robbing the area of its recharge. So it was beautiful and great, and you had shallow water, then you had average water, then you had deep water, until we pumped it dry because it did not recharge itself any longer. And basically right in the town of Eloy, if you will, right up Picacho Boulevard and then Sunshine Boulevard, which hits I-10, that was the course of the Santa Cruz River. It ran right down that.
Wow.
Interesting. Mm-hmm. Where do you see, population growth, just Arizona, where do you see Arizona going in relation to water?
Well, Phoenix Valley being the water hog in Arizona, I see most of it going there. I don't know if you guys know what's going on with the Arcojala Valley, but they're wanting to retire the agriculture there, link those wells together, and throw them into the CAP canal. Well, the first time they tried that, the people with the CAP and DWR said there's no volume, there's no capacity left in the well to flow that water, so you can't do it. Well, since then, they've cut agriculture off of 300,000 acre feet of water a year that would come down the canal. So there's plenty of capacity now. I think that's going to be the catalyst to get that going, and we'll find more water for development.
Where is that? Where is that valley?
West of Phoenix. Well,
we're going to see a great big desalinization plant go in.
We will.
Foreseeable future, won't we?
The total dynamic of the deal, and I saw you've heard of the Common Rail deal that's trying to set up between Phoenix and Tucson. Well, they're trying to build a commuter train between the two. And I think the biggest reason behind that is now is Pinal County is drying up and is becoming a solar county. Lots of electricity. The grid is sophisticating more and more. I would say a lot of our industry will be in Pinal County, especially the, if you will, non-clean industries. And your employees will come in every day on the common rail. Mm-hmm.
And so they've talked about a rail for probably almost my whole life. Mm-hmm. Is it going to happen?
That's a good question. Is I-11 going to happen?
Yeah.
I don't know. Is I-11 needed today? Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I make that run every day except for Sunday up to the farm in Eloy, and I'm on I-10 all the time, and it's especially packed. Yes, between Marana and Eloy, it's packed and treacherous. So.
Yeah, it's awful. It really is awful. We chose to drive back through Florence on a 2-lane highway. Explain I-11.
Well, most of it's built already. It comes down from Kingman, at least our portion of it. Comes down from Kingman, then it kind of disappears before you get to Wickenburg. It's supposed to go west of Wickenburg, come all the way down, hit I-8, and then I think it's still supposed to take, is it 95 that comes from I-8 down to I-10? No, from I-10 down to I-8 through Buckeye, Gila Bend.
Yeah.
And then there it was supposed to come down I-8 just west of Casa Grande, and before you get to Casa Grande, it would head back south again and loop around Tucson and take the truck traffic out of the Tucson area.
Right. Yeah, the last route I saw had it going through the valley here.
Yeah, exactly.
Just a big broad loop that going south of Tucson and west of Tucson.
And just trying to take the pressure off I-10.
And I think it was supposed to hit I-10 again out there around the Sonoyta exit or something around there. All this stuff has just been like preliminary, and I don't know if it's approved but that's the vision that I saw for getting the truck traffic out of Tucson.
You were talking about the Jones Farm and the water, your static water level rose 100 feet.
100 feet.
Yeah. And so years ago, our father, because our well we had a dry well, a drying up well, and a good well here when we came, 1965. And it was, every time they were in that well, the water was dropping. And of course, they were farming where Saguaro Bloom is now, the Wong farm across the way. And it was old, inefficient farming. The water came up, and you just poured it on the high end and dropped it off the bottom. And
careful, I was the last guy to farm that. So you
no.
Careful what you say.
Were you really?
Yes.
No kidding.
Yes, we leased that from.
But that I'm talking about before the laser leveling. I'm talking 45, 50 years ago. So our water's gone way up here. We're at 308 now is our static level.
No kidding.
Yes,
yeah. And it was at 3 something, like 390 and dropping. So my dad drilled his last well to 600 feet because he says I'm gonna have this well last a while. But some good news is happening, right? I mean, there's some in this valley, some recharge. And
I think Arizona is basically out of the drought now. It broke last year. I think we were pretty close to average rainfall. I know Sonoyta area was extremely wet last year. The problem that we're having, and nobody wants to talk about it, but there's something going on with the upper basin states where we need rain is, okay, so the catchment for the Colorado River is Utah, the western slope of Colorado, parts of Wyoming, and actually just a little bit up into the corner of Montana, Idaho. I think water comes that far down for the Colorado River, but that basin has not been catching any rain. And as I said, I think the drought has broke. So there are places in Utah that do flow into the Colorado that have record amounts of snow, but it's been such a cool spring that it's not melting. It's probably going to be there again this time of year next year. It's melting very slowly, and so as it melts slowly, mostly it goes into the ground instead of flowing to us.
It'll recharge.
What we need is these monsoons to get started and rain on top of that snow and
melt it and get it down here.
Yes, get it down here. But Mother Nature has her own plan, and we got to live with it.
we're pretty parochial about our view on water. You're stealing my water up there by not letting it melt.
Exactly.
That's funny.
So were you telling me, or was somebody else telling me lately about a new, I don't know if it's a GMO alfalfa or something? There's some innovation in alfalfa.
Well, there's the Roundup Ready.
I know about that.
That I haven't seen anything on the alfalfa. As far as the GMOs go, it's funny you brought that up, how the whole GMO thing has disappeared, how that whole discussion has gone away now that the world has learned that the GMOs have done much more good than bad. There's some countries that not only was their major food source in peril, but also their major export, being the one and the same, were in peril, and the GMOs have saved it, whether it be a GMO that helps fight a bacterial or fungal infestation, or whether it be a pest that it wards off, or whatever. We're seeing that the benefits are there, and of course, the true measure will be the long-term use. We'll find out.
Yeah.
Together.
Yeah, I'm challenged on all that. And again, this book I read that was The End of the World is Just the Beginning, which was talking about the end of globalization, but talked a lot about agriculture, and it was interesting. The author is a pretty big environmentalist, but he says the biggest enemy to prevention of worldwide hunger is organic. He really slammed organic because of the inefficiency and because of all the challenges that attach to that, and that you can't feed large scale populations with that. And it was an interesting perspective, even though he was an environmentalist.
So like the GMO that was the one that fights the pests that I'm most familiar with, which was the pink bollworm in cotton. That GMO, that genetic, that gene was a pre-existing gene in a plant in Africa, and that plant could ward off the pests that would attack plants like it or other plants near it. All we did was transfer that gene into cotton, in the case of cotton, which is the one I'm most familiar with. It's not that we invented a new gene, we just introduced that gene into a different species. I don't think man is capable of creating a new gene at this time. All we can do is transfer or transplant genes. So I don't think we can create a never-seen-before monster. I don't think that's in our wheelhouse yet. Will we and can we do that? I don't know. People are crazy. Who knows what they'll invent?
We seem to be working on stuff like that.
Yeah.
If we don't do it, AI will do it. And really, it's an interesting time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and the thing I worry about the most is the oversight on stuff like this. Who is really watching it? I don't know.
Yeah, and what gives them the power to watch it and make decisions in that, because you better be careful who you appoint to tell us what way to go.
Yeah.
Because we may not go where we want to go.
Yeah. Well, I agree, but I'm going to shut up because that's a whole series of podcasts if you get me started on that. Because I think that so much rides on that. So back to alfalfa. We feed mostly alfalfa, a bit of Bermuda here. Water we've talked a lot about. What are the challenges in growing alfalfa?
Alfalfa is pretty challenge free. We have some pests that will attack it, and we address those. They're mostly seasonal, so we'll make sure to be aware when that part of the season comes up.
Are those bugs that go and eat it?
Yeah, bugs. And then the weed thing is obviously a big thing, and we've got the Roundup Ready alfalfa if you want to plant that. What we have found is that most of the Roundup Ready varieties were developed in Nebraska or your part of the country, and we get them down here and introduce them to 115-degree heat, and they don't melt.
Work. Yeah.
They melt.
Really?
They don't yield. So we have not used a lot of it. They just don't hold up to the salts in the soil and the heat of the
Roundup Ready ones.
The Roundup Ready, yes. They're not ready for prime time, if you will. But you were asking earlier. And the world is pretty much addicted to desert Southwest alfalfa because we produce so much, 7 to 9 cuttings a year, 7 to 10 tons per acre. We don't have a lot of users for that product right here in this state. We have a little bit of a dairy industry, but it has definitely declined with the challenges. So we're exporting a lot of this alfalfa, and the rest of the world really likes it. So.
In the future, we're going to keep doing that, or our exports will dry up and we'll use it more internally, or?
No, the future is we're going to plant houses on top of the alfalfa fields, so.
They'll go away.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that's a great prediction. Love to hate to hear to that.
So as we wind up, will large-scale agriculture, some agriculture is going to last, right? But will large-scale agriculture still be viable in Arizona 20 years from now?
I would say in central Arizona, no. I really would.
Central Arizona.
Phoenix through Tucson, Arlington, Wilcox, if you want. It's going to be along the river. Of course.
The river meaning the Colorado.
Colorado River and Yuma area. We all know that if you're eating lettuce in the middle of the winter, is where it's coming from, basically. But even that area is seeing exponential growth, and how much of their land will they be able to maintain? We're crazy. We forget that we got to eat every day. We're just interested in growth, and I really don't know if anybody's watching just how much acreage comes out of production and where it goes to. But I will say this: if there's a child that goes to bed hungry tonight, anywhere in the globe, it has nothing to do with agriculture and what or how much we produce. That's politics, because we are the kings of overproduction. Our government probably has 3 to 7 years of corn in inventory. The same can be said for soybeans. So we're doing our part in agriculture. Now, if the politicians aren't doing their part and somebody's going hungry, don't point the finger at us.
I think those are words of wisdom.
I think we should end on that.
That's a great place to end, right there.
It's summer, and I'm thinking about Tombstone. It's usually about 8 degrees cooler, and we were checking temperatures yesterday, and it was exactly that, 8 degrees cooler. And of course, that's cooler than Tucson, so that makes it like 15 or more degrees cooler than Phoenix area. So that Salt River Valley gets a little toasty in the summer. So Tombstone's kind of a way to get at least a little cooler and get out of town, and summer's a good time to be down there. The whole town is up and running, and then stay at the ranch, and we have all our riding and the programs, the diversity of riding, and the cowboy experience with the cattle ranch. And it's just good time to be in Tombstone if you're an Arizonan. And of course, we've got the ranches in Montana. Circle Bar is, of course, height of the season now. It's got the river mile of Judith River running through it. We have the UTV tours, lots of riding, the shooting, the archery, and of course, just the beauty of the weather and the views of central Montana. It's a rural ranch, and it's an historic one, and it's not a resort. It's just a historic dude ranch and a great place to be. I'm kind of wishing I was there right now thinking about it. And OTO, Montana's first dude ranch, we're operating that again for the Forest Service, bringing guests back for the second summer in a row after 83 years off. And we run a very traditional dude ranch experience there. It's kind of eating, sleeping, riding, with a tour of Yellowstone with the great Yellowstone Forever Tour Company. And then we also add a trip down the river, or a whitewater trip, and an afternoon at the hot springs, which is just down the mountain from the OTO, Montana's first dude ranch and one of the most historic ranches in the West. Alan, we're sitting here. I think we've had more fun than we normally have, and we always have a good time with Arnold. And I just think, and I've mentioned it before, but talk about, and Arnold said it himself, rural people, they by necessity have to have that self-reliance, independence. You've got to find your own way. You got to get out of the poverty crop or poverty weed of cotton and do alfalfa, and you find your way. You do it. You take care of yourself, and we talk a lot about that. That's the West. That's America, and that's the difference maker.
Yes, that's all I can say. You said it well.
Well, once again, I end the program with a smile on my face. I'm just laughing and enjoying the good time, and I'm sure you join with me too. So we're done for today, but we'll be back next week. A gentleman named Chris Wimmer will be telling us some very interesting stories about some of the Western history that we may know and a lot that we would like to know, and we'll be delighted to find out. So why don't you join us again? Reach out to us at the Cowboy Up Podcast at gmail.com, the Cowboy Up Podcast at gmail.com. Why don't you raise your hand and volunteer to be on the program? Why don't you tell us about somebody who would be a great guest? And perhaps you'd like to say, you know what, I enjoy this program. I'd like to be a part of it. I'd like to participate. Could you perhaps use me as a sponsor, our organization, to sponsor the Cowboy Up Podcast? And with a smile, we'll say we would love to consider that. So once again, reach out to us at the Cowboy Up Podcast at gmail.com. Walk tall, ride safe, and you be back. Bye for now.
Storm rolled in from the western sky. 2,000 head of steers took flight. Good night paid those boys to ride, and by damn they would, but though some might die, don't say goodbye to the cowboy way. Tradition lives, and it's here to stay. 100 years ago and strong today, so don't say goodbye to the cowboy way. She's 10 years old on a stout bay horse. 300 years they guide her course, from the Spanish quest to the blue and gray, to what we call the cowboy way. Don't say goodbye, don't say goodbye to the cowboy way. To the cowboy way. Tradition lives, and it's here to stay. 100 years ago and strong today, so don't say goodbye to the cowboy way. Rawhide and steel, hooves and horns, legacy to the yet unborn. A code that comes from a hard-lived life. Your destiny when you're born to ride. Don't say goodbye to the cowboy way. Tradition lives, and it's here to stay. 100 years and growing strong today. So don't say goodbye to the cowboy way. Don't say goodbye, don't say goodbye to the cowboy way.
And again, a thank you to Jim Jones and his posse for this theme song that we love. Don't say goodbye to the cowboy way.